Before the golden age of piracy, before eye patches and parrots became cliches, before the Caribbean was a pirate's playground, there was a different breed of sea raider. These weren't just outlaws chasing treasure. They were warriors, rebels, explorers, and sometimes state-sanctioned agents of chaos. We're talking about the forgotten pirates of the medieval world. From the frozen fjords of Scandinavia to the sun-scorched Mediterranean and beyond, they didn't just loot. They shaped empires, redirected trade routes, and altered the course of history. And yet, history books barely whisper their names. Today, we're sailing back in time, long before Blackbeard, to uncover the untold story of the medieval pirates who truly conquered the oceans. Piracy in the medieval era wasn't just theft. It was survival. It was strategy. It was war. As kingdoms rose and fell and merchant ships stuffed with silk, salt, and silver crossed dangerous waters, opportunities sailed alongside them. But here's the twist. Piracy wasn't always a crime. In many regions, medieval rulers encouraged it. Kings and nobles issued something called a letter of marque, a get-out-of-jail-free card that turned pirates into privateers, legally allowed to attack enemy ships. One man's pirate was another's patriot. In the Baltic and North Seas, for example, raiders weren't seen as criminals. They were community defenders, attacking foreign ships in retaliation or preemptive raids. And in the Mediterranean, piracy wasn't just tolerated, it was an industry. Long before the medieval age truly began, the Vikings were already redefining naval warfare. And while we often think of them as warriors, they were also pirates, strategic, brutal, and brilliant at sea. They didn't sail blindly into villages. They mapped coastlines, knew tide patterns, and struck fast. They built sleek longships capable of navigating both ocean and river, allowing them to raid deep inland, something few navies could do. But here's the secret few realize. Viking piracy didn't die. It evolved. Centuries later, Viking descendants in places like Norway and Denmark would continue raiding merchant ships, only now with royal backing. In some cases, these seafaring men were knights and nobles, blending legitimacy with piracy like it was a game of politics. While northern pirates ruled the cold seas, the Mediterranean was dominated by corsairs, Muslim pirates operating from North Africa and parts of the Middle East. Based in cities like Tunis, Algiers, and Tripoli, these pirates weren't just independent raiders. Many were backed by empires like the Caliphates or later, the Ottomans. They raided Christian ships and coastal villages, captured prisoners for ransom or slavery, and created a shadow economy based entirely on naval dominance. But it wasn't one-sided. Christian pirates did the same. In fact, entire communities were built on the backs of these brutal, sea-based conflicts. Naval cities whose economies thrived on plunder and human cargo. The Mediterranean during the medieval period was a chessboard of piracy, espionage, and holy war, where merchant ships often had to pay protection fees just to survive the voyage. In Northern Europe, a different kind of pirate war raged. The Hanseatic League, a powerful alliance of merchant cities like Lübeck, Hamburg, and Bremen, controlled vast trade networks across the North and Baltic seas. But where there's wealth, there's always someone looking to take it. Enter the Vitalian brothers, a group of pirates who initially started as privateers fighting for Sweden during the Siege of Stockholm. Once the war ended, they didn't stop. They turned rogue, plundering ships across the Baltic, and even establishing pirate bases on islands like Gotland. They were so effective that Hanseatic cities had to form their own navies, merchant guilds building war fleets to protect themselves. For a time, piracy was the dominant naval power in the region. The English Channel was a constant hotspot of piracy in the medieval period. Caught between England and France, two nations often at war, this narrow sea became a battleground. English pirates frequently raided French coasts and vice versa. Some were sponsored by their monarchs, others were completely independent. And then there were the Channel Islands, neutral, lawless, and filled with sea dogs looking to make a fortune. It wasn't just about stealing gold. It was about controlling the flow of goods. Wool, wine, and salt were just as valuable as coin. In this zone, piracy and politics were often impossible to separate. Let's bust a few myths. Most medieval pirates didn't wear flamboyant outfits or carry parrots. There were no X marks the spot treasure maps. The truth is far grittier and far more human. Pirates were often poor fishermen or ex-soldiers. Their ships were stolen or cobbled together from spare parts. They were multilingual, highly organized, and surprisingly democratic. Many pirate crews voted on decisions, even punishments. And women? While rare, they weren't absent. There are records of female pirates, especially in the Mediterranean, leading raids or running pirate ports. The romanticized pirate is a later invention. What existed in the medieval period was more complex, more brutal, and more influential. Piracy wasn't just a European affair. In the Indian Ocean, Chinese and Arab pirates fought over trade routes. In Southeast Asia, groups like the Lanun dominated the Strait of Malacca, charging tolls, or attacking those who refused. Some medieval pirates operated like tiny floating nations. They had bases, alliances, and even primitive forms of law. These maritime powers influenced everything from spice prices in Europe to political shifts in Asian port cities. The scope of medieval piracy was global, and yet most of it is completely missing from popular history. Here's what might shock you most. Medieval pirates often operated under their own codes of conduct. These weren't lawless mobs. They had rules. Some pirate crews had strict regulations about dividing plunder, treating prisoners, and punishing betrayal. Others outlawed drinking on duty or brought in scribes to document their agreements. Why? Because a ship without order quickly became a death trap. Discipline kept them alive longer than any sword. These early codes would inspire the later, more famous pirate codes of the Caribbean, but they started centuries earlier. Eventually, kingdoms got tired of the chaos. Powerful navies emerged. Trade guilds hired mercenaries. Fortified ports were built with cannons aimed at the sea. By the late Middle Ages, piracy was increasingly hunted. In the north, pirate havens like Gotland were wiped out. In the Mediterranean, joint Christian-Muslim alliances sometimes worked together to clear out pirate strongholds. And across Asia, empires grew wise to sea raiders, crushing them with fleets of their own. Pirates didn't vanish. They went underground, waiting for the golden age to rise centuries later. So, what did medieval pirates truly leave behind? Not just tales of buried treasure or thrilling sea battles, but a reminder that the sea was never empty. It was a battleground, a marketplace, a kingdom of its own. These pirates, outlaws, adventurers, opportunists, did more than rob ships. They shaped borders, disrupted empires, and forced kingdoms to confront a new kind of threat, the fluid, floating power of the rogue sailor. And if history tends to forget them, perhaps it's because they remind us that the wildest stories aren't fiction. They're just lost at sea, waiting to be rediscovered.